In this segment, we're going to talk about another Ghost product, the Ghost Pro 3.3 trigger connector for Glock pistols. Arthur, if I understand this correctly, the 3.3 means a 3.3 pound trigger, which may be the lightest trigger weight that I'm aware of. Is that correct?
As far as I know, yes, Dave. It's 3.3 pounds on the tip of the trigger with OEM springs.
Right.
And it also is a glitch-free trigger, like you say, or it doesn't have the bump or load prior to the gun firing.
Right. Now, this particular model also has a trigger control tab to deal with that dreaded over travel, am I right?
Yes, Dave, it does.
Okay. Now, did you intend this to be for competition, for combat, or both?
Everything we kind of do is combat oriented.
Right.
This was an evolutionary trigger.
Right.
When I first started to try to figure out a way to remove that bump when the trigger bar bumps into the connector.
Right.
This was one of the prototypes that I had made.
Okay.
And it ended up being the lightest trigger pull, and that was kind of by happenstance.
Right. Now, you know, you hear a lot of stuff on the interwebs and gun magazines and stuff like that. Oh my God, light triggers, liability, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, my thoughts on, you know my thoughts on that. But, you know, you probably have some thoughts on that as well. And as a matter of fact, if you check in at the Ghost website, Arthur has a pretty good article that he wrote about the whole light trigger phenomenon.
Yeah.
Just give me a few of your thoughts on that.
It's, first off, it's 3.3 pounds on the tip.
Right.
No one generally fires a pistol by putting their finger on the tip.
No, that's interesting.
It's more center of the trigger, and the further up the trigger you move, the less leverage you're going to have, and the bigger your trigger finger is, the more centered it's going to be on the trigger face.
Right.
So it ends up being probably 4.2 pounds, 4.5 pounds, depending on your pistol, depending how many rounds have been through it and at what point all the parts mate.
And that's a good point. You know, everybody wants to measure these things at the tip. Well, the leverage would certainly be at its maximum.
Yes.
You start moving up and it can be a pound or a pound and a half more weight.
Yeah, any arms examiner,
Right.
like if the gun was ever used in a shooting, would place his fixture in the center of the trigger.
Right.
To check the trigger pull weight.
Right, absolutely. And quite frankly, folks, the whole trigger pull weight thing, that is not a problem for criminal prosecution. That's a liability thing. And I was in law enforcement for 30 years. I've seen a lot of lawyers, and let's face it, Arthur, a lawyer can make an issue out of anything he wants.
Yes. And,
Yeah.
and we've had, to the best of my recollection at this point, hundreds of our triggers used in shootings.
Right.
And no one's ever been prosecuted. It's never even been brought up.
Well, and that is worthwhile to know. So, you know, what do? Do you worry about liability, or do you make your gun more shootable for you? Well, making it more shootable for you is pretty much what Ghost is all about. So if you want more information, check in at the Ghost website, www.ghostinc.com.